mistake. Minutes later, 50 black SUVs showed up. She froze, staring at her phone in horror as the message sent. Her trembling fingers hovered over the screen, her heart punching against her ribs. She had meant to send it to her boyfriend, a teasing picture, a line that could burn a man alive, but instead she sent it to him. The contact she'd saved weeks ago by mistake. The one labeled Mr. M. The one everyone at the restaurant whispered about but never dared to look in the eyes. Her stomach sank. The phone buzzed once, twice, 3 times, messages coming in but not from him. From her best friend. From her boyfriend. But not from him. She swallowed hard, sweat tracing her back. She prayed it was all a fluke, a cosmic joke that would go away if she just turned off the phone and breathed. But her heart knew better. Minutes later, the ground began to shake. Tires screeched outside. Her manager's voice trembled as he looked out the glass door. One black SUV, then another, then 5, then 10, until the whole street outside the restaurant was filled with roaring engines and tinted windows. 50, at least 50. She felt her knees weaken as every customer went silent. The laughter, the clinking of glasses gone. All that remained was the hum of fear. Now tell me, where are you watching from right now? And what time is it? Ride button, because what's about to happen next, you won't believe it. Her phone vibrated again. One message this time. From him. A single line that turned her blood to ice. Stay where you are. She glanced toward the window, just in time to see men in black suits step out of the SUVs. Broad shoulders, stone faces, earpieces glinting in the dim light. The kind of men who didn't talk, they just obeyed. Her manager stumbled backward, whispering her name, but she was frozen in place. Her mind raced through every possibility. Maybe he thought it was a prank. Maybe he'd laugh. Maybe she'd survive this with nothing more than a story to tell. But deep down, she knew this wasn't a man who laughed. This was the kind of man whose silence could end people. The restaurant doors swung open, and the air shifted. Every head turned as one of the men entered, tall, expressionless, eyes hidden behind black shades. He scanned the room slowly, then pointed straight at her. Her breath caught in her throat. He said her name without emotion, and the sound of it echoed like a gunshot. She tried to speak, to explain, but no words came out. The waiter beside her stuttered something, but the man raised a hand, and everything stopped again. He walked toward her, every step heavy, deliberate, final. When he reached her table, he didn't touch her. He only leaned in close enough for her to hear his calm, chilling voice. You're coming with us. She could barely move as 2 other men appeared at her sides. Her co-workers watched in stunned silence, too afraid to intervene. Her manager muttered something about calling the police, but one cold glare from the man silenced him. They escorted her out of the restaurant, past the stunned customers, into the night filled with roaring engines and flashing headlights. Her voice finally broke free. She begged, pleaded, tried to explain it was all a mistake. But they didn't listen. They didn't even look at her. One opened the back door of a sleek black SUV and guided her inside. The door shut behind her with a heavy thud. Her heartbeat drowned out every sound. Inside the SUV, everything smelled of leather and danger. The city lights flickered through the tinted glass as they sped away. Her mind kept replaying the same thought. I'm going to die because of one stupid message. She tried to unlock her phone, maybe to delete it, maybe to send one last text, but the man beside her calmly took it from her hand and pocketed it without a word. She pressed her trembling fingers against her lap, fighting the urge to scream. Every second felt stretched thin, like the world was holding its breath. They drove in silence for miles, her eyes darting to the driver, then to the men in the front seat, then to the streets flashing by. No one spoke. No one even blinked. Finally, the SUV slowed, and she saw it. A towering building, glass and steel glowing like fire in the dark. They drove underground, where more guards stood waiting. One opened her door. She hesitated, but a single nod from the man was enough. She stepped out, legs shaking, her throat dry. They guided her through a long hallway that echoed with their footsteps until they stopped in front of an elevator. No one pressed the button. It opened automatically, as if it had been waiting. Inside, it was empty, cold, silent. She wanted to run, but her body wouldn't obey. The door closed behind them, and they rose. Every number on the elevator screen felt like a countdown to her end. When it finally stopped, the men stepped out first. Then one of them gestured for her to move. The hallway they entered was lined with marble and darkness. At the end, a door stood half open, light spilling through the crack. She heard a voice. Deep, low, calm, the kind of voice that didn't need to shout to command obedience. It said one word, "Bring her in." Her chest felt like it might burst. She stepped through the door and saw him for the first time. The Mafia boss. The man whose name made even the police whisper. He was sitting at a table, phone in hand, the faintest smirk on his lips. He didn't look up right away. He just scrolled through his screen, her message. Her face burned with humiliation. Every heartbeat pounded in her ears. She wanted the ground to open and swallow her whole. He finally looked up, eyes cold and unreadable, the smirk fading into something sharper. He studied her for a long moment, and the silence stretched like a blade. When he spoke, it wasn't loud, but it was enough to make her knees nearly buckle. "You think this was funny?" She shook her head, words tumbling out. Apologies, explanations, everything. She told him she'd meant it for someone else, that it was an accident, that she didn't even know who he was. But he just watched her, unmoved, his fingers tapping the phone. Then he stood, slow and deliberate, and circled the table. She stepped back instinctively, her breath shallow, her heart racing so fast it hurt. He stopped just inches from her. The faint scent of his cologne mixed with the sharp fear clinging to her skin. His eyes didn't blink. His voice dropped lower. "You sent me something you can't take back." She froze. He reached into his jacket, and she flinched. He paused, not pulling a weapon, but holding up her phone that had been taken in the car. He placed it on the table and leaned close enough for her to feel his breath against her ear. "Now, you're going to tell me why I shouldn't make you disappear for this." Her pulse hammered like thunder. She couldn't tell if she was about to faint or scream. And for a brief, horrifying moment, she wondered if this was how her life would end. Not with a crime, not with betrayal, but with one single mistake that sent her straight into the lion's den. But then his expression shifted, a flicker, something unreadable, and he leaned back. The men behind her stayed silent, waiting for his command. She knew that whatever he said next would decide everything. Her breath trembled as she waited. And in that unbearable silence, the only thing she could think was, how do I survive this? He stared at her for so long that every second felt like a knife turning in her gut. She could feel the weight of his gaze pulling her apart, dissecting every word she'd said, every shaky breath she took. He didn't move, didn't blink. Just silence, so heavy it drowned her. Then, finally, he exhaled. The sound was low, like a growl. He turned away and walked toward the window, the city lights bleeding through the glass behind him. She thought maybe he'd let her go. Maybe this nightmare would end. But then he spoke again, and his voice cut the air like a blade. "You sent me that message, and now everyone thinks you belong to me." Her knees almost gave out. She shook her head, desperate, words tumbling out that made no sense. She wasn't his. She wasn't anybody's. But the way he said it, it wasn't a threat. It was a statement, a fact. He turned back to her, his eyes colder than before, his jaw tightening with something that looked like anger but felt like control. He said there were already rumors spreading. Someone from his circle saw the message. In his world, that meant something. That meant she wasn't just a random girl anymore. She was a name whispered in the wrong conversations. And that made her a liability. Her heart raced as he closed the distance between them again. His hand lifted, not to hit her, but to tilt her chin up with just 2 fingers. Her breath hitched, her pulse wild. He said her name slowly, testing it, like it was the first word he'd ever spoken that mattered. Then he told her the rules had changed. She wasn't going anywhere. Not tonight. Not until he decided what to do with her. She tried to plead again, but his guards were already moving. One step forward, gesturing for her to follow. She hesitated, looking at him, searching for even a flicker of mercy. There wasn't any. So she followed, her mind spinning. Every step echoed like a countdown. She was led down another hall, through another door, into a room that looked too luxurious for what it represented. It wasn't a cell, but it might as well have been. When the door shut, the silence felt worse than the noise. She collapsed on the edge of the bed, gripping her hair, shaking. One message, one stupid mistake. And now she was trapped in the home of a man who could erase her existence with a phone call. She wanted to scream, but even that felt dangerous here. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time didn't make sense anymore. Her mind replayed everything, his stare, his words, the power in his silence. She hated how her body reacted to it. The fear, the heat that came with it, the confusion. She buried her face in her hands, fighting it, hating herself for feeling anything but terror. Then the door opened. She jumped to her feet, heart slamming, and there he was again. No guards this time, just him. His jacket was gone, his sleeves rolled up, revealing the tattoos wrapping his forearms like stories of violence and victory. He didn't speak at first, just looked at her, studied her like a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. Then he asked her something that made her freeze. "Did you send that to test me?" She stared at him, stunned. "Test him? Her?" She shook her head violently, stammering that it was an accident. He smirked, but it wasn't amusement, it was disbelief. He stepped closer, slow and deliberate. Her back hit the wall before she even realized she'd moved. He stopped inches away, his breath steady, his presence suffocating. He said people didn't make mistakes with him. They didn't text him. They didn't even breathe wrong near him. And yet here she was doing both. Her chest heaved. She whispered that she didn't know who he was, that she didn't mean any disrespect. For a moment, something in his expression softened, just for a heartbeat. Then it vanished. He told her ignorance wasn't protection, that she was already part of something she didn't understand. He reached past her, and she flinched, but he only picked up her phone from the table beside her. He scrolled through it, his thumb moving over the screen, eyes narrowing slightly. She wanted to grab it back, but she knew better. He paused on one contact, her boyfriend. He looked at her, and the air changed. The silence was electric. He asked if that was the man the message was meant for. She nodded weakly, ashamed, terrified. He smirked again, darker this time. Then he pressed one button and handed her the phone. "Call him." Her stomach dropped. She shook her head, whispering no, begging not to. But his tone hardened. "Call him. Now." Her hands trembled as she dialed, the sound of the ring echoing in the room like a countdown to something terrible. The boyfriend picked up, cheerful, clueless. She couldn't even speak at first. Then, before she could find her voice, the man in front of her took the phone from her hand and put it to his ear. His tone was calm, polite, terrifying. He said the boyfriend's name. The line went silent. Then he told him that his girl wouldn't be coming home tonight, that she was safe for now. But if he ever texted her again, he'd lose more than just a relationship. He hung up. The silence after that was unbearable. She wanted to scream, to cry, to run. He handed the phone back to her and said softly that her old life was over. She didn't understand what that meant until he turned away and said she was under his protection now. His tone made it sound less like a promise and more like a sentence. When he left, she crumbled. Every nerve in her body felt raw. She wanted to disappear, to wake up somewhere far away. But she couldn't, because the truth was something inside her had shifted. The fear was still there, burning bright, but underneath it was something else. Something dangerous. Curiosity. The way he spoke. The way he looked at her. The way power seemed to orbit him like gravity. It terrified her how much of it made her feel alive. She didn't sleep. Not that night. She paced the room, her mind bouncing between panic and disbelief. At dawn, a knock came at the door. A different guard this time. He told her to follow him. She didn't argue. They led her to a dining room where he was already sitting, sipping coffee like nothing had happened. He gestured for her to sit. She hesitated, but he gave her a look that left no room for refusal. She sat, hands shaking, eyes lowered. He told her that from now on, she'd work for him, that keeping her close was the only way to control the damage. She asked what kind of work. His smirk returned, the kind that tests loyalty. She didn't understand, but she didn't dare question it. He told her he'd see what she was capable of before deciding her place. Then he stood, adjusted his cufflinks, and left her there, alone again, surrounded by more questions than answers. As she sat there, she realized something chilling. This wasn't about the message anymore. This was about control, about ownership, about what happens when someone crosses a line they didn't even know existed. She looked down at her phone again. The message was still there in the thread. The picture, the words, a digital ghost of the mistake that had rewritten her entire life. And somewhere in the back of her mind, despite the fear clawing at her, she couldn't help but think, what would he do next? And worse, what would she become if she stayed? Because something told her, deep down, that this was only the beginning. She couldn't eat. The plate in front of her was untouched, her hands cold even as the morning light bled through the tall windows. He had left hours ago, surrounded by men in suits and silence, and the house felt too big, too loud in its stillness. She could hear whispers in the hallway, guards talking, phones ringing, low voices saying her name like it was a problem no one wanted to deal with. She didn't belong here. Every second screamed that truth at her. But leaving? That was suicide. Her phone buzzed on the table. A new message. Unknown number. Just 4 words, we need to talk. Her chest tightened. It had to be her boyfriend. He must have found a way around the warning. Panic surged through her. She wanted to delete it, pretend she hadn't seen it, but curiosity burned too strong. She hesitated, then replied with one word. Where? Minutes later, another buzz. Outside, her blood ran cold. She rushed to the window, and her heart nearly stopped. A car, old, beaten, parked down the street. She could barely make out the figure inside, but she knew that silhouette anywhere. He came for her. Stupid, brave, doomed. She turned from the window, mind racing. If the boss found out, no, when he found out, it wouldn't just be her life on the line. He'd kill him slowly as a message. She had to stop it, but the front door had 2 guards, and the cameras watched everything. She needed a distraction. Her pulse hammered as she scanned the room, every thought louder than the last. Then she saw it, the coffee pot still hot. Her movements were quick, desperate. She pretended to stumble, knocking the pot to the floor, the crash echoing through the hall. Within seconds, 2 guards appeared. She clutched her hand, feigning pain, whispering apologies. One knelt beside her, another called for help. In that chaos, she moved, fast, through the side door, down the steps, out into the sunlight that felt like freedom. She ran. Her lungs burned. Her heels hit the pavement hard, the wind cutting her face, her heart a drum in her ears. The car door swung open before she reached it. He jumped out, eyes wide, relief and fear tangled together. He tried to speak, but she slammed her palm against his chest, pushing him back. She told him to go. He refused. He grabbed her arms, demanding answers, asking what these people wanted with her. But all she could say was one word, run. Then she saw it, a flash of black at the corner, a shape moving too fast, the reflection of sunlight on metal. Her scream caught in her throat. Tires screeched. A black SUV came roaring down the street, another behind it, engines growling like monsters. He turned just in time to see the danger, but it was too late. Men poured out, suits, guns, silence. The world slowed to a nightmare. She tried to shield him, tried to explain, but a voice cut through everything. His voice, deep, calm, terrifying. He stepped out of the second SUV, no jacket, just a dark shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, veins visible like coiled wire. His eyes met hers, and that was it. Her legs gave out. He walked closer, the air shifting with every step. The guards didn't move, didn't breathe. He didn't look at her first. He looked at the man beside her. The boyfriend tried to speak, to say something, but he never got the words out. The boss moved faster than she thought humanly possible. One hand, one motion, and he slammed him against the car. A dull crack followed, the kind of sound that stayed in your head. She screamed, begging him to stop, but he didn't. He turned his head slightly toward her, his expression blank, eyes cold. He told her to get in the car. She refused, crying, shaking, saying she didn't mean for any of this to happen. He didn't repeat himself. 2 guards grabbed her arms, not roughly, but firm enough to remind her, she had no power here. He let the boyfriend drop. The man groaned, still alive, barely. The boss didn't even glance back. He got into the SUV, and the guard shoved her in beside him. The door shut, sealing her fate again. The silence was unbearable. She wanted to scream at him, but the words wouldn't come. He just stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, the city passing by in flashes of light and shadow. After what felt like hours, he finally spoke. He said she'd broken the first rule, that he had warned her what defiance meant. She tried to explain. She wasn't trying to escape. She was trying to protect him. But he laughed, bitter and humorless. Protect him? From me? She turned to him, eyes full of fire now. She said he had no right to do this, that she wasn't his to control. The SUV stopped, so suddenly she almost hit the seat in front of her. He turned to her then, slow, deliberate, his expression unreadable. He said in his world, control wasn't a choice. It was survival. She couldn't breathe under the weight of his words. The air felt too thin. He leaned closer, voice low, telling her that every person around him had an expiration date, and she was lucky hers hadn't come yet. Then, softer, almost like a whisper, he said she'd better start understanding what being is meant before someone else tried to test it. The SUV started again. The ride felt longer this time. They reached a secluded place, a mansion on the edge of nowhere, hidden by walls and silence. She was dragged out, not roughly but firmly, led inside while he disappeared into another room. She stood there, surrounded by strangers, heart racing, still hearing his voice echoing in her head. Hours later, he came back. Different mood now. Calmer. He sat across from her, a drink in his hand, eyes scanning her face. He said he'd checked in her background, where she worked, who she was. Said she had potential, that she wasn't like the others, that maybe there was more to her than a mistake. She didn't know what to say. He was unpredictable like fire, beautiful one second, deadly the next. Then he said something that chilled her blood. He wanted her to work directly for him. No guards, no handlers. Her job would be to manage his communications. Messages, deals. The same thing that started this mess would now define it. She refused at first. She said she wasn't a criminal. He smiled, leaning back, saying everyone was until they got caught. Then his tone shifted, low warning. He told her if she didn't agree, the man she ran to earlier wouldn't wake up again. Her heart dropped. She didn't even think. She just nodded. And that's how it began. Days turned into a blur. Meetings, codes, messages, people who came and went without names. She watched him work, saw how he commanded loyalty through fear and respect, how the world bent around him. She started to understand why people followed him. Not because they wanted to, but because there was something magnetic in his danger. But somewhere along the line, something shifted between them. The way he looked at her changed. The way his tone softened when they were alone. The way his eyes lingered longer than before. She felt it too, and she hated that she did. She was supposed to be terrified, not curious, not drawn. But every time he stood close, every time he said her name in that deep, quiet tone, her body betrayed her. She told herself it was just fear, that she wasn't falling into whatever trap this was. But fear didn't make her pulse race like that. Fear didn't make her crave his approval. Then one night, everything exploded again. Literally. She was in the study, sorting through files when the glass shattered. A deafening blast followed. The entire house shook. Guards shouted, guns drawn. She hit the floor as debris rained down. The boss stormed in, grabbed her by the arm, and pulled her behind him. Another explosion, closer this time. Someone had breached the property. His enemies. He didn't hesitate. He dragged her through the smoke, his grip iron, his voice calm even in chaos. He shoved her into a car, barked an order, and the engine roared to life. She turned to look at him, but all she saw in his eyes was focus. Ruthless, unbreakable focus. And that's when it hit her. The only person who could destroy him was someone already inside his world. Someone like her. She didn't know how long she'd been running. The night blurred around her, broken by flashes of headlights, gunfire, and the sound of his voice calling her name through smoke and chaos. Her lungs screamed for air, her legs trembling, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. Everything that happened, The message, the SUVs, the explosions had built to this moment, and she wasn't sure she'd survive it. He had trusted her. He'd save her life more than once. But tonight, she found out something that changed everything. The messages she'd been delivering, the codes she thought were business deals, they weren't. They were hits. People were dying because of words she sent. She'd been part of it without even knowing. And when she confronted him, he didn't deny it. He just looked at her with that cold, unflinching expression and said it was the cost of survival. Now, as the mansion burned behind them, she could hear sirens in the distance. Not police, no, his enemies. The ones who wanted his empire. The ones who wanted him dead. He'd told her to run, to get to the safe house. But she couldn't leave him like this. Not after everything. She turned back, heart pounding, smoke stinging her eyes. The heat hit her face as she pushed through the wreckage. The walls groaned, ready to collapse. She saw him then, half covered in dust, blood on his shoulder, gun in hand, eyes sharp as ever. He barked her name once, furious and relieved at the same time. She ran to him, grabbed his arm, tried to drag him out, but he wouldn't move. He said he had unfinished business. She told him to forget it, that the place was coming down. He shook his head, voice steady even as the fire roared louder. He said this was his world. He'd built it. He'd finish it. She didn't understand what he meant until she saw the detonator in his hand. Her heart stopped. He wasn't trying to escape. He was trying to end everything. She grabbed his wrist, begged him not to do it. He told her she didn't understand, that every man he'd trusted had turned on him, and the only way to clean his name was to burn everything he'd built. She said he wasn't God, that he couldn't decide who lived or died. For the first time since she met him, his voice cracked. He said he'd lost that right a long time ago. The fire crept closer. The floor beneath them started to shake. She could hear the distant shouts of his men outside, but they sounded far away now. It was just the two of them, trapped between what was and what could never be. He looked at her, really looked, and for once his eyes weren't hard. They were tired, human. He told her she had a choice, to walk out and forget him or stay and burn with him. She slapped the detonator from his hand and shoved him toward the exit. He resisted, furious, shouting that she'd regret it, but she didn't care. She screamed that she'd already regretted everything since the day she met him, that she wanted her life back, that she wanted to feel free again. The roof groaned, beams falling like thunder. She didn't wait. She pulled him toward the doorway, the flames biting at their clothes. They stumbled out just as the explosion ripped through the building. The shock wave threw them to the ground. Heat scorched the air. The world went white for a second. When the smoke cleared, she was lying on the dirt, coughing, everything spinning. He was beside her, barely conscious, bleeding badly. His men rushed over, shouting orders, but she couldn't hear them. She crawled closer, her hands shaking as she tried to stop the bleeding. He grabbed her wrist weakly, his eyes finding hers again. He told her to leave, to disappear, that there were people who'd come after her because of him. She refused. She said she wasn't running anymore. He smiled, faintly, the first real smile she'd seen from him. He said she'd finally learned how to survive. Then his eyes fluttered shut. She screamed his name, shaking him, begging him to wake up, but his chest didn't move. For a moment, the world stopped. She didn't know if she was crying from anger, grief, or relief. Maybe all of it. The men lifted his body, carried him to one of the SUVs, and she sat there, numb, covered in ash, watching everything she'd known go up in flames. Hours later, at the hospital, she waited outside his room. The doctors said he'd live barely. She didn't know what to feel. When he finally woke, his voice was weaker, softer. He said he'd made arrangements. Everything he owned, everything he'd built was gone. He'd given his people freedom, money, a chance to start over. The empire was over. She asked why. He said because of her. Because she'd reminded him what it felt like to care about something other than power. She didn't know what to say. He reached for her hand and told her to walk away, to never look back. That if she stayed, his enemies would never stop coming. She wanted to tell him no, that she couldn't just leave after everything. But he squeezed her hand once, eyes locking on hers, and said that this was the only way she'd ever really be free. Then he let go. She left that night. No guards, no warnings, no SUVs following behind. Just silence. She didn't know where she was going, but for the first time, it didn't matter. The city lights looked different now. Less like danger, more like possibility. A month later, she got a package. No note, no name. Inside was a phone and a single message that read, "Keep it for when you need me." Her hands trembled as she read it, knowing exactly who it came from. He was alive, somewhere watching. Not gone, just waiting. She smiled through tears, tucked the phone away, and walked into the sunlight, ready to start over. She learned that sometimes fate doesn't come as love or hate, but as chaos that changes you forever. He lost his empire. She found her freedom, and together they burn away everything that once defined them. Some mistakes destroy you, others set you free. No power or wealth is worth your peace. Love doesn't conquer everything. Sometimes it's the reason you finally walk away. If this tell us where you're watching from,